Philippines, 1762. A British expeditionary force led by Admiral Samuel Cornish and General William Draper launched a daring attack on Manila, a capital city under Spanish rule. Their goal, to gain control of the Pacific trade and establish their dominance in the region. After a fierce battle, the British prevailed and took control of Manila for 2 years. But their triumph was short-lived, as the Treaty of Paris in 1763 ended the 7 Years' War, and the British were forced to return Manila to Spain. A little-known history that has remained largely unknown to most people today. This is the British occupation of Manila. In the 18th century, France and Britain were engaged in a struggle for dominance in Europe and around the world, in what is infamously known as the 7 Years' War. Initially, France had the upper hand with impressive battlefield victories, but Britain turned the tide, thanks to leaders like William Pitt and skilled military figures like Admiral Edward Hawke and General James Wolfe, who led crucial victories including the Battle of Quebec and the Battle of Quiberon Bay. When the 7 Years' War broke out in 1756, Spain initially remained neutral, but it soon became clear that the conflict would impact Spanish interests in Europe and overseas. In 1761, France and Spain signed the Third Pacte de Famille, in which they agreed to support each other against Great Britain. Spain formally entered the war on the side of France. However, Spain's military contribution to the war was limited, and its resources were stretched thin by the demands of the conflict. Moreover, Spain's alliance with France was strained by a series of disagreements and disputes, which further weakened its position in the war. In 1762, the British then sought to destroy the Spanish Empire and turned their attention toward two of their most prized capital cities, Havana, the jewel of the Caribbean, and Manila, the bustling hub of commerce and culture in the Pacific. The British sought to gain control of the global trade routes and weaken the Spanish Empire. Led by Admiral Samuel Cornish and General William Draper, the British forces launched a daring attack on Manila in 1762, facing off against the Spanish defenders in a fierce and bloody battle. As the battle raged on, the Spanish forces were no match for the British invaders, who quickly seized control of Manila and set about establishing their dominance over the Pacific trade. After their victory over the Spanish defenders, the British soldiers went on a rampage, plundering the city and seizing valuable treasures. In the accounts of the then Archbishop of Manila, Manuel Rojo, the British soldiers ransacked churches and private residences, looting precious religious artifacts and jewelry. They also took control of the city's commercial activities, hijacking ships and seizing goods from merchants. Pillaging and looting were not limited to material possessions. There were reports of British soldiers committing acts of violence against the local population, including rape and murder. The British saw the Archbishop as a figure of great wealth and influence, and they believed that he could hold a valuable bargaining chip in their negotiations with Spain. They then demanded a ransom of 4 million pesos from Archbishop Rojo, and then he was taken captive and held in custody until the ransom was paid. For the Filipinos, the British were seen as ruthless and savage, with no regard for the lives or well-being of the local population. They were viewed with fear and hatred, another foreign and violent force that sought to dominate and control their homeland once again. During their 2-year occupation of Manila, the British took full advantage of their new colony. They set up a colonial government, replaced Spanish officials with their own, and exploited the local population. The British also used the Philippines as a base for their military operations and established trading relationships with neighboring countries. However, the actions of the British in Manila were sure to provoke a counterattack. After the retreat from Manila, the Spanish forces regrouped in the nearby province of Pampanga, where they launched a counterattack using guerrilla tactics. Additionally, the Spanish also received support from local Filipinos, who joined the fight against the British occupation. Fortunately for the Spaniards and Filipinos, their resistance worked in keeping the British confined in the Manila region, preventing them from spreading their control any further. However, this occupation and resistance was abruptly cut short. The 7 Years' War pushed Britain's military, financial, and economic resources to their limits. The war was unbelievably expensive and required massive amounts of manpower and resources. The cost of the war was so high that it forced the British government to take out loans and raise taxes to pay for it. While Britain won many victories, it literally came at a great price. The Treaty of Paris was then signed in 1763, a peace agreement that ultimately ended the 7 Years' War. As part of the treaty, Britain was forced to return several territories it had captured during the war, including Havana and Manila, to Spain. By signing the treaty, Britain hoped to secure peace and stabilize their empire, while also securing territorial gains, such as control of Canada and India. The treaty also established a new power in Europe, with Britain emerging as a dominant naval and commercial power. After 20 months, the British were finally forced to withdraw, and the Spanish army once again marched through the streets of Manila. The city was once again under Spanish control. But for the Filipinos, it was a bittersweet moment. They were still under colonial rule, and the Spanish oppression would continue for years to come. The joy of victory was tempered by the knowledge that their struggle for freedom was far from over. I take a lot of time and research to make this video for you guys, so if you like this one, you might want to watch another video right here. And subscribe to the channel for updates. See you next time.